Have you ever felt like you stumbled upon something special? Not just something that piqued your interest, but something that felt destined, as if it had been waiting for you all along. Maybe it was a book you found tucked away on a dusty shelf, or a recommendation that came at just the right moment. Maybe you weren't even looking for it, yet it showed up anyway. That's not a coincidence. That's a calling. What if I told you the universe sometimes whispers through these seemingly ordinary discoveries? What if I said that when you find something that resonates deep within you, it's not chance, it's alignment? Today, we're diving into one of those rare books, a book that doesn't just share information, it changes you. It doesn't just tell a story, it mirrors your own. The kind of book that almost feels alive, like it has a soul of its own. In a world drenched in distractions and constant noise, finding a book that speaks to your spirit is a quiet revolution. So, why is this book so important? Because it's not loud. It doesn't demand your attention. It earns it. It holds truths that most people pass by without realizing. It holds ancient wisdom, disguised in simple language. And it's patient. It waits until you're ready. The moment you begin reading it, something begins to shift. Not just in your thoughts, but in your energy. You might not notice it right away, but it's there. A gentle nudge toward becoming who you were always meant to be. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet forest. The light filters through the tall trees. The air is rich with the scent of earth and leaves, and the only sound is the soft crunch of your footsteps on the path. In your hand, you're holding the book. Its cover is worn, the pages soft from use, like it's been read by many souls before yours. As you move through the forest, reading the words aloud, something happens. Each sentence feels like a key, unlocking doors inside your heart that you didn't know were closed. The book speaks of things you've always felt, but never said, regrets you carry silently, dreams you buried, fears you never faced. But it doesn't shame you, it accepts you, like an old friend who says, I see you, and I still love you. Now you're sitting on a bench by a river. The water rushes past, mirroring the flow of your thoughts. You read about a chapter on letting go, about how clinging to the past, to pain, to identity, is what keeps us stuck. It tells the story of someone who lost everything, a job, a relationship, a sense of purpose, and yet found freedom in the emptiness. You pause, you close the book, and you think about your own life, about the things you're holding on to that might be holding you back. Maybe it's a story you keep telling yourself. I'm not good enough. I'll never succeed. People always leave. The book gently whispers, what if that story isn't true? What if you could write a new one? You begin to see that the book isn't really about the author. It's about you, about every person who's ever felt broken or lost or unsure. Each story in it becomes a mirror, reflecting your own potential, your own strength, your own hidden brilliance. It doesn't offer you a straight path or an easy answer. It offers you questions, powerful, uncomfortable, beautiful questions. And in seeking those answers, you begin to remember who you are, who you've always been. The next chapter invites you to revisit your childhood, the dreams you had when the world felt full of magic, when you believed anything was possible, when fear hadn't yet taken root. The author asks, where did that child go? You realize that child is still inside you, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to dream again. You write in the margins, I want to dream again. And so you do. You close your eyes and imagine a life where you're not driven by fear, but by joy, where you create, not because you have to, but because it sets your soul on fire, where you connect with others, not from need, but from love. That's the life the book leads you to, not with rules, but with reflection. As you read further, you encounter stories from strangers, real people who wrote letters to the author, sharing how the book touched their lives. One man wrote that he read it while recovering from surgery, and it gave him hope. A woman shared how it helped her leave an abusive relationship. A teenager wrote about finding the courage to come out. You realize you're not alone. None of us are. The book becomes a thread, weaving through lives, connecting people through shared pain and shared healing. Then comes a chapter on silence, not the silence of avoidance, but the sacred kind, the kind where you sit with yourself without distraction, where you listen to your breath, to your heart, to the voice within that's always been there, just waiting for you to slow down. The author talks about spending days in nature, alone, and how in that solitude, they remembered their truth. You decide to try it, just one day. No phone, no noise, just you. It's uncomfortable at first, but slowly, peace rises, and in that peace, you hear something, yourself, day by day, chapter by chapter. The book becomes more than a book. It becomes a journey, a companion, a guide. It doesn't fix you because you were never broken. It helps you see what you forgot, that you are whole, that you are worthy, that you are powerful. And so, with each turn of the page, you come back to yourself, deeper, stronger, softer. You become the person you were always meant to be. And the book, it becomes part of your story. You carry it with you, not always in your hand, but always in your heart. Its lessons echo in your decisions. Its stories color your perspective. Its questions live on in the quiet moments when you're alone and thinking. You begin to recommend it to others, not with a shout, but a whisper, sharing it only when you sense they're ready. And that, perhaps, is the most magical part, that the book, once a silent teacher to you, becomes a message passed on, a ripple, a beginning for someone else. The journey doesn't end, it just changes form. Like all true wisdom, it expands, it grows, it lives on, as it lives in you now. And so, the next time you pass a shelf, or hear a quiet suggestion, or feel that spark of interest, pause. It might just be the universe, placing another treasure in your path, waiting for you to uncover yet another piece of your truth. And the story continues. You begin to wonder what else the book might have hidden in its quiet pages, treasures you missed the first time through, and so you start over, this time not as a curious reader, but as a seeker of deeper truth. You notice the symbols between lines, the pauses between paragraphs that seem to speak more loudly than the words themselves. You realize the book has layers, like life, and with each pass, it reveals more, not because it changed, but because you did. And then something truly magical happens. You find yourself no longer merely reading the book, you are living it. Each day becomes a new page, and each decision, a sentence written in the ink of intention. The lessons you've absorbed begin to guide you not only in reflection, but in action. When conflict arises, you remember the story of forgiveness, told halfway through the book, a story about a man who wrote a letter to the person who betrayed him, not to rekindle a broken bond, but to free himself from the weight of resentment. Inspired, you try it too. Maybe not with a letter, but with a moment of quiet release. You whisper, I forgive you, even if they never hear it, especially if they never do. And just like that, the heavy stone in your chest starts to dissolve. You look back at the chapters on resilience and growth, and you realize you're now writing your own version. Not everything is perfect. Life is still unpredictable. But now you meet its chaos with a steady heart. And that's everything. That's transformation. That's the book's secret promise fulfilled. Not to change your world, but to change how you walk through it. And so, your story continues. It continues not because you're seeking an ending, but because you finally understand that there is no final chapter. This story is infinite, just as your growth is infinite. And perhaps, just perhaps, someone will find your story someday, tucked inside the pages of their own rare book. And from there, your journey evolves further. You take your insights and turn them into creation, paintings, poems, conversations that crack open hidden places in people's hearts. You begin to teach, not formally, but by example. Your life becomes a quiet sermon on love, courage, and presence. And you notice something. The more you share, the more you receive. The more vulnerable you become, the stronger you feel. People start telling you, you've changed, but you know it's not change. It's revelation. You're simply becoming more of what was always there. The book whispers, once again, keep going. You are not done, and you don't stop, because something inside you has awakened, and now it won't rest. You start writing your own book, not necessarily with the intention to publish, but to understand yourself better, to trace your journey, to give voice to all the echoes inside. Every word you write becomes a seed planted in the soil of tomorrow. Maybe one day, your story will be the one someone stumbles upon, tucked away on a dusty shelf, arriving just when they need it. And so, the cycle continues, beautifully, endlessly, and still, the echoes of that rare book continue to resonate in unexpected ways. And with each breath, you carry it further, sharing the story not through the turning of pages, but by the way you walk through the world, with presence, with grace, with quiet power. The book lives on, through you, through others, endlessly. And in your dreams, sometimes, you return to that forest, that river, that first moment when the book opened your eyes to what was always inside you, and you smile, knowing this story, your story, is far from over. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time. And still, the echoes of that rare book continue to resonate in unexpected ways. And with each breath, you carry it further, sharing the story not through the turning of pages, but by the way you walk through the world, with presence, with grace, with quiet power. The book lives on, through you, through others, endlessly. But even as you move forward, there comes a day when life throws something heavy your way, an unexpected loss, a betrayal, a moment where everything seems to crumble, and your instinct is to reach for the book again, not because you need answers, but because you need to remember. You pull it from the shelf with fingers that tremble, and as you open it, your eyes land on a sentence underlined long ago. You don't remember underlining it, but it's there, waiting. Sometimes, breaking is the beginning of becoming. You sit with that line. Let it breathe in the space around you. Let it echo, because in that moment, it doesn't feel like a book anymore. It feels like a hand on your shoulder, a voice whispering in the silence. It's okay to fall apart. The pieces will not be wasted. And that's when you understand something deeper. The book was never just written by one person. It was written by life itself, by every soul who ever struggled, who ever dared to feel, to fall, to get back up again. The author may have held the pen, but the ink was made from all of us. So you keep reading, slowly this time, not to finish, but to feel. One afternoon, you find a chapter you must have skipped, or maybe it simply wasn't meant for you then. But now, it lands with the weight of truth. It speaks about waiting, not the passive kind, but the sacred kind, waiting without rushing, trusting in timing, honoring the seasons of your soul. It tells a story of a woman who spent years chasing a dream, only to burn out, collapse, and finally hear the whisper she'd been running past. Rest is not failure. It is preparation. You close the book and lie down. Let yourself rest, deeply. Guilt tries to surface, but you let it pass. You whisper to yourself, this too is part of the path. And so, life continues, but differently, with more slowness, more intention. You start to see lessons in everything: the way the morning light touches the floor, the way someone says your name, the silence between notes in a song. You begin to live not just as a person, but as a poem. Then one day, something strange happens. You meet someone, a stranger, maybe at a cafe, or a bookstore, or in passing on a trail, and they seem lost, not visibly, not in an obvious way, but you can feel it, like a vibration under their words. And without thinking, you mention the book. You don't say much, just enough, and their eyes light up, curious, hopeful. They write the title down. You walk away without expecting anything. Months later, you get a message. It's them. They found the book. They read it, and it helped. In that moment, you feel something shift inside, something ancient and powerful, because you realize you've become part of the cycle. You're not just a seeker anymore. You're a steward, a guide, a quiet lighthouse in someone else's storm. And the beauty of it is, no one sees it happening. It's not broadcasted. It's not loud, but it's real. And real things don't need to be seen by everyone to matter. They just need to exist. Now, you start keeping a journal, not just of your thoughts, but of the way the book continues to ripple through your life. A conversation with a friend that healed old wounds, a walk in nature that reminded you of something important, a dream that guided your next step. The book lives not just in your mind anymore, but in your days, in your being. And so you continue living, learning, loving, with more depth than before. You start to see yourself as both student and teacher. You carry the weight of your experiences not as a burden, but as a sacred offering. Eventually, you begin to write letters, to no one in particular, just open letters, left in park benches, slid into library books, shared online anonymously. Words like, "You are not alone," and "Your pain is valid," and "There is beauty waiting for you." Not everyone reads them, but some do, and that's enough. That's how revolutions start, quietly, from soul to soul, heart to heart. One rare book, one open mind, one courageous breath at a time. One day, as you walk through the familiar aisles of your local bookstore, you pass the shelf where you once found that rare book. Your hand instinctively reaches out, brushing the spines like greeting old friends. And there it is. Not the same copy, of course, but another, a fresh print, the same title, same weight, but different, somehow. You smile, remembering everything that followed the first time you held it. You consider buying it again, just to keep, but then you think, maybe you'll leave it for someone else to find. Maybe it's time for someone else to begin. As you place the book back, your eyes meet those of a stranger across the aisle. They're holding the book now, looking at it like they've found something that calls to them. You don't say a word. You just smile, and they smile back. That moment is enough. The handoff is silent, but sacred. The cycle continues. Your days now feel fuller, though on the outside, little has changed. You still walk the same streets. You still have your routines, but everything feels richer, more alive. You listen more intently, speak more slowly, feel more deeply. The world hasn't shifted, but you have, and that changes everything. One evening, during a thunderstorm, you find yourself at your desk, writing again. But this time, it's different. You're not just journaling, not just remembering, you're creating. You begin to write your own book. It's not about grandeur or perfection. It's about truth, your truth, the kind that cracks the shell open and lets the light in. You write not to be read, but to be real. And as the rain drums against the windows and the sky lights up in flashes of silver, you write the first sentence, This is not a beginning, but a remembering. From there, the words flow, raw, honest, unfiltered. The story spills out of you, and you don't stop it. You don't polish it. You let it live. Weeks pass, maybe months. You lose track of time in the most beautiful way. Each chapter is a reflection of a lesson lived, a pain transformed, a joy rediscovered. You don't worry about the ending. You trust that it will reveal itself when it's ready. And then, one day, it's done. You look at the last page, your heart pounding, not with fear, but with awe. Not because the story ends here, but because you wrote it. You gave shape to your inner world. You gave voice to the silence. And now, it lives beyond you. You decide to share it, not widely, but with intention, with those who need it. And slowly, quietly, it begins to spread. A friend shares it with a friend. A stranger messages you with gratitude. A teacher uses a passage in their classroom. It grows like roots underground, unseen, but strong. Years later, you find yourself in conversation with someone who's gone through their own dark night. They speak in circles, not knowing how to name their pain, how to hold it. You don't interrupt. You just listen. And then you say, I read something once. And you quote that old line, the one you underlined all those years ago. Sometimes, breaking is the beginning of becoming. Their eyes fill with tears, not because they're broken, but because they've just remembered. They can begin again. And in that moment, you realize something you always knew, deep down, that healing isn't linear, growth isn't a destination, and wisdom isn't loud, it's lived. You walk home that night under a sky full of stars, the kind of night that makes you feel small and infinite all at once. You think about the book again, how it changed you, how you passed it on, how, in some quiet, sacred way, you've become part of something larger, a chain of souls choosing to wake up, to live fully, to love deeply. You whisper to the sky, thank you, for the book, for the pain, for the becoming, for all of it. And somewhere, in another part of the world, someone stumbles across a worn out book with soft pages. They flip through, and something catches their breath. They feel seen, called, changed. They turn the first page with hesitant fingers, not knowing that in doing so, they've just opened a door to themselves. The words greet them like a long lost friend, not loud, not urgent, just present, as if the book had been waiting for them all along. Each sentence seems to hold a mirror to their soul, revealing not only their wounds, but also their wonder. They pause on one line that feels almost too personal, like it had been written just for them. Your life is not a mistake. Your feelings are not too much. Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a compass. They sit with that line, breathe it in, and something inside begins to shift. A tightness loosens, a silence stirs, and from that moment on, they carry the book everywhere, in their bag, on their nightstand, sometimes open, sometimes closed, but always close, because it feels like safety, like truth, like home. They begin to notice how differently the world looks when you're truly present. The way the trees move in the wind, like they're dancing just for you. The way a stranger's smile can feel like a blessing. The way your own breath can anchor you in the middle of chaos. They start to write down their own reflections, filling a small notebook with fragments of self, their thoughts, their fears, their quiet joys. And slowly, they begin to trust their voice again. Maybe for the first time, they read a passage one night about fear, about how fear isn't something to be fought, but listened to, befriended, understood. It's described not as a monster, but as a messenger. And suddenly, their whole relationship with fear begins to change. Instead of resisting it, they sit with it, ask it questions. What are you trying to protect me from? And fear answers, not with words, but with memories. And those memories become doors, doors that lead to healing. In time, they meet someone else, another seeker, another soul carrying invisible burdens. They share the book, carefully, respectfully, and again, the cycle continues. Each person who reads it adds something of themselves to its energy. Each tear, each smile, each moment of stillness they offer it feeds its spirit. Because, yes, the book is alive, not with heartbeat, but with presence. And presence is everything. Years pass. The book changes hands many times. It travels cities, towns, countries. It's translated, gifted, forgotten, rediscovered. It sits quietly on shelves, in backpacks, by hospital beds, in quiet corners of cafes. And in each place, it listens. It holds space. It offers not answers, but permission. Permission to feel, to break, to remember, to begin again. Somewhere, a child finds it, too young, perhaps, to grasp all its meanings, but they feel something in it, a comfort, a magic. They read it aloud to their mother, who is weary and worn down, and as the words float through the air, something softens in her face. She closes her eyes. Just for a moment, she rests, and the child smiles, not knowing they've just given a kind of healing. Elsewhere, a man grieving a loss opens the book in the middle of the night. His tears fall onto the pages. The words don't take the pain away, but they sit with it like a companion, like a gentle nod saying, I know, me too. He presses the book to his chest and breathes, for the first time in days, deeply. And far away, an old woman in a rocking chair reads it aloud to no one, or maybe to everyone. Her voice is cracked with age, but strong with wisdom. She smiles as she reads, remembering her own journey, her own becoming, and with each word, her voice becomes a gift echoing into the silence. Because here's the truth, the book never ends. Not really. It evolves, it deepens, it spreads, not just in pages, but in people, in the way they speak, in the way they show up for each other, in the way they learn to show up for themselves. It lives in every act of quiet courage, in every soft number, in every bold yes, in every gentle breath that says, I'm here, still here. And you who found it once and were changed, you've become a part of that legacy, a part of that living thread. You may never know how many lives you've touched simply by healing your own, by choosing to feel, to love, to keep going. And somewhere, someone is writing their own version of the story. It may not look the same, the language may be different, but the soul of it, the soul is the same. A story of awakening, of remembering, of rising from the ashes, not as something new, but as something true. The book lives on, through whispers and wonders, through wounds and wonders, and still, you walk, not ahead, not behind, but with life, side by side, no longer racing towards some imagined destination, no longer escaping your own shadow. You walk with open eyes and an open heart, and in doing so, you begin to see the divine in the ordinary. A child laughing in the distance feels like a reminder. A breeze brushing your face carries the weight of something sacred. The mundane becomes miraculous. Even the ache in your chest sometimes feels holy because it reminds you that you're alive, still feeling, still open, still growing. And every now and then, you return to the book, not always to read, but to sit with it like a friend you don't need words with. You hold it in your hands, and it grounds you. You think of all the hands that have held it before you, all the souls who breathed with it. You wonder where it will go next, and you smile, because you know it'll find the right person, just like it found you. One night, during a storm, you find yourself writing again. This time, The words come faster, freer, not because you're trying to be profound, but because you're finally unafraid to be honest. You write about the moments you nearly gave up, the nights when sleep felt impossible, the mornings when you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize yourself. And you write about how you made it through, not with grand victories, but with small acts of defiance, getting out of bed, taking a deep breath, saying, maybe tomorrow will be better. Your writing becomes its own kind of book, not bound in leather or printed on thick paper, but woven into conversations, into the way you listen, the way you hug people a little longer now, the way you ask, how are you? Really? Because you've come to learn that presence is the most generous gift, that healing doesn't always look like a breakthrough. Sometimes it looks like doing the dishes while crying. Sometimes it looks like taking a nap. Sometimes it looks like sitting with someone in silence, offering nothing but your undivided attention. And you realize maybe you've become the book, not in ego, not in arrogance, but in essence. Because the book was never really about words. It was about presence, about truth, about transformation. And now, people come to you, not for advice, but for your presence, your steadiness, your way of holding space without fixing, of witnessing without judgment. You've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Just being there, fully, is enough. You remember a line from the book. Sometimes we are not here to change the world. Sometimes we are just here to hold it while it changes. You write that one down. Stick it on your wall. Let it guide you through the harder days. And as you move through the world, with your quiet courage, your patient love, your gentle fire, you begin to feel it in your bones. You are the story now, not the one being told, but the one being lived. And someone someday will look at you and feel something shift. They won't know exactly why. Maybe it'll be the way you laugh or the way you listen, but something in you will remind them of themselves, of who they might become, of what they forgot, and they'll start their own journey toward presence, toward truth, toward the long road home. And so the journey expands, not linearly, not predictably, but like a river carving its path around stone and through valley, slowly becoming something timeless. You begin to recognize that life, too, is a kind of scripture, one written not just in ink, but in moments, in the way your heart softens at a stranger's kindness, in the weightless pause when someone understands you without needing you to explain. These are your sacred texts now, and so the journey expands, not in a straight line, but in spirals and echoes, like waves lapping at the shore of your becoming, each one carving a deeper truth into your bones. You are no longer the person who picked up the book all that time ago. That version of you was necessary, sacred, but it has now dissolved into something wider, quieter, stronger. You begin to understand that growth is not always about rising. It's also about softening, returning, yielding to the tide of what already is. Where once you ran from stillness, now you court it like an old friend. The noise of the world doesn't grip you the way it used to. You've tasted something richer, and now silence feels like a feast. Conversations shift, no longer surface level exchanges, but soul deep dialogues that leave traces of light between every word. You don't feel the need to be understood the way you once did, because now you understand yourself, and that's enough. On walks, you notice the way sunlight breaks through branches, how a single crow's call can crack open your heart, how time bends when you are fully present. You write, not to impress, but to express, to exhale what you've gathered in all those quiet moments. The book you once held like a lifeline becomes a mirror, then a window, and finally, a door through which others begin to find you, not for who you pretend to be, but for who you've finally allowed yourself to become. You start to offer your story, not with certainty, but with honesty. You say things like, I don't know either, and people breathe easier around you because you give them permission to be real. And then, something even more subtle happens. You begin to disappear, not in the tragic sense, but in the sacred way that ego dissolves when truth enters the room. You become a witness, a presence, a quiet space where others feel safe enough to find themselves. Your identity shifts from the one who is healing to the one who holds space for healing. People don't always notice it. That's okay. You've stopped needing the applause. You've found a deeper rhythm now, one that plays in the bones of ancient trees, in the hush between waves, in the still gaze of a person who finally sees themselves. And sometimes, yes, you still fall apart. But now, even that feels holy. You cry without shame. You rest without guilt. You begin again, not because you failed, but because every ending is just a chapter break in this book without a final page. And one day, you meet someone, a stranger, yet familiar, like a reflection from a dream, and they tell you something you once told someone else, long ago, when you were still finding your way. You smile, you nod, the circle is complete. You realize the book has written itself into the collective soul, passed like a flame from heart to heart, never burning out, only burning brighter. And now, when you sit by the firelight, journal in hand, stars above, breath slow, you understand that the book was never just paper and ink. It was the map back to yourself, and you followed it. And now, you are the map for someone else. No titles, no platforms, just presence, just love, just the sacred unfolding of what it means to be fully, fiercely, beautifully alive. And so the story continues, not louder, but deeper, not faster, not for attention, but for alignment, because some journeys aren't meant to be shouted, they're meant to be lived, gently, courageously, endlessly. And as the days turn into months, and the months stretch quietly into years, you notice that time doesn't move the way it used to. It no longer rushes. It ripples, softly, slowly, like a river that has learned the shape of every rock it flows over. You wake up not chasing the day, but meeting it with a kind of reverence, like each sunrise is a ceremony, and each breath a vow to stay present. There are still hardships, of course. Life hasn't stopped throwing shadows. But now, instead of resisting them, you let them speak. You listen to your grief like it's an old teacher. You hold your fear like it's a child that's been lost in the dark too long. Even your mistakes don't sting the way they used to, because now you see them as pages, necessary chapters in the narrative of becoming. You start creating rhythms for yourself, not routines born out of pressure, but rituals born out of care. Lighting a candle before you write, placing your hand on your heart when you feel anxious, saying thank you, not out of obligation, but because something in you genuinely whispers it now, like a prayer. You notice how certain people drift away, not out of malice, but because your frequencies have shifted, and that's okay. You let them go with grace, understanding that some stories aren't meant to last forever, and in their place, new souls arrive, gentle, grounded, like they've walked similar paths, and recognize you, not by your name, but by your energy. Conversations with them feel like remembering, and slowly, subtly, you begin to build a new world. Not a perfect one, but an intentional one. A world where your values aren't just ideas, but practices. Where rest is sacred. Where joy is not a reward, but a responsibility. Where honesty isn't scary, but freeing. And that book, that one book, still sits on your shelf. Sometimes You open it just to breathe in its scent, to run your fingers over its worn pages like they're sacred texts. Other times, you don't need to open it at all, because now its words live in you. They echo in how you hold others, in how you forgive, in how you begin again and again, not as a failure, but as an artist shaping your life with tenderness. And one day, long from now, someone might ask you what changed you, and you won't need to say much. You'll just smile, perhaps place a hand gently on your heart, and whisper the truth that lives there now. I remembered who I am. And so the journey stretches on, not in leaps or grand declarations, but in the quiet unfolding of your soul, like a flower that blooms at midnight with no audience but the moon. There are days where everything feels still, where nothing dramatic happens, where the world simply breathes around you. And even in that stillness, you find beauty. You start to notice the way the wind shifts before a storm, how the scent of rain carries memories you can't quite place, how the laughter of a stranger can crack something open inside you. These small, unnoticed things become the holy moments, the ones that tie your heart to the earth in a way no doctrine or philosophy ever could. You begin to write more, not to be heard, but to hear yourself. Pages fill with your raw thoughts, your quiet hopes, your confessions to the universe. And one day, without fanfare, you realize something incredible. You no longer need the book to remember who you are. It served its purpose, not by giving you answers, but by helping you learn how to listen, how to wait, how to trust. And that trust becomes the foundation of everything. You trust the timing of your life. You trust your healing, even when it's slow. You trust your voice, even when it shakes. You trust that no matter what falls apart, you will rebuild, not into the person you were, but into the person you were always meant to become. The book remains a relic, a friend, a witness. But now, the story it sparked is yours to tell, not in ink or on a stage, but in the way you hold your days. And as you continue walking, breathing, loving, becoming, you realize this was never about the book. It was always about you, and you're just getting started. With that said, thank you for walking through this journey with us, one of reflection, discovery, and quiet transformation. Sometimes it's not the loudest voices or the brightest lights that change us, but the quiet truths tucked between the lines, waiting patiently to be seen. If this story stirred something within you, hold on to it. Let it guide your steps, soften your heart, and remind you that even in the stillness, you are growing. You are not alone, and your path is unfolding exactly as it should. Thanks for watching, and until next time.